50 years ago, Harper Lee published her Pulitzer Prize-winning book, To Kill a Mockingbird, a book which, despite its relatively young age, was quickly considered an American classic, a distinction it still holds to this day. It was an immediate critical and commercial success, earned several awards in addition to the Pulitzer, and is still considered by many critics to be one of the greatest examples of literature to be found anywhere. But perhaps more important to many, it inspired a movie. Just 2 years after the book was published, Universal Pictures, along with director Robert Mulligan and screenwriter Horton Foote, released their film of the same name, starring Gregory Peck and Mary Bedham. And like the book, the movie is remembered as a classic example of its kind, also winning its fair share of awards, including 3 Academy Awards and 3 Golden Globes. In addition, the American Film Association ranks the film as the #1 courtroom drama, and it is consistently listed among the top 100 greatest films of many such lists. But more significant for this review is the fact that both book and movie are among my all-time personal favorites. So what better way to break this tie than to pit these two classics against each other and see which one comes out on top? Ready, Hatter? Ready, Matt. Let's do it. This is Books vs. Movies review of To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's start with our 3 principal characters, Atticus, Jem, and Scout Finch. These are the 3 main pivotal characters of the story. Atticus Finch, a relatively progressive lawyer in a conservative southern town, is a man of integrity, more concerned about doing what he feels is right than what public opinion says, and teaching his 2 children important moral values, such as seeing everybody in an equal light and trying to see things from their perspective. Atticus comes under fire when he takes the case of Tom Robinson, a black man who is accused of raping a white girl. Though all evidence suggests otherwise, the town of Maycomb is convinced that he did it, and Atticus emerges as the clear voice of reason in his defense. Because of this, he is shunned by many of his peers. In the movie, Atticus is portrayed by Gregory Peck, and I know that this is said by everyone who sees it, but his acting in this film is phenomenal. It's one of the few times in cinema when the actor is the perfect fit for the character. Gregory Peck is Atticus Finch.
I'm no idealist. To believe firmly in the integrity of our courts and of our jury system. That's no ideal to me. That is a living, working reality.
There's no doubt about it. Atticus Finch is a great character, and Gregory Peck gave us a flawless portrayal. Atticus is the father of 2 children, Jem and Scout. Jem probably has the most character growth of anyone in the novel, simply because he's entering into adolescence and starting to learn the bitter but necessary truths about life that all children his age have to learn. That in mind, I think Jem is done better in the book. Philip Alford, the actor who portrayed him in the movie, still did a good job with the character, but he just isn't as much a part of the story. And even though the book is told from Scout's point of view, we still get to see Jem's character growth throughout the novel, and we don't get that as much in the movie. And finally, there's Scout, portrayed in the movie by Mary Bedham. I was actually quite surprised at how good this actor was. Child actors in movies are pretty hit and miss, but this girl definitely had a feel for the part, and her acting felt very natural. Plus, she and Gregory Peck have great on-screen chemistry together, really feeling like father and daughter. The one downside to her character in the movie is that we don't get that feeling of 2 Scouts that we do in the book, the child who is in the story and the adult who is telling the story. There's a little narration here and there, but it's not quite the same. We don't really get the sense that this is Scout's story being told from an older and wiser vantage point. Still, what the movie does give us with Scout is spot on. Just like with Peck portraying Atticus, Mary Bedham was Scout, and it was hard to tell sometimes where the character ended and the actor began. And even though we don't get as much from the narration, we still get the sense that she is an objective observer of all that's going on, and it's still Scout who learns the important lesson at the end. Ask anybody what makes this movie so good, and I'd be surprised if most of them didn't talk about Gregory Peck and Mary Bedham playing these phenomenal characters. But what about the rest of the village of Maycomb, the stereotypical people living in a small town? Let's take a look. One thing you can definitely say about this movie is that there is not a single bad actor in it. Everyone is very talented and fits his or her role well. Because of the natures of the 2 different types of storytelling, the supporting characters play somewhat different roles. The whole point of the story is that Scout has to learn how to imagine these characters complexly, and because Scout is the one telling the story, we're introduced to these characters from her somewhat biased point of view. When it comes right down to it, the whole point of the supporting characters is to judge and be judged by Scout Finch. And although the Scout telling the story is an adult, the Scout within the story is a child, and so we get a somewhat simplistic characterization of these characters which are themselves very complex. The movie characters are a little different. They still kind of serve the same purpose, but we get more of an objective point of view, and so we're able to pass our own judgments on the characters without the bias of the little girl. Neither one of these methods is necessarily better than the other, but it does mean that we have advantages for certain characters. Characters like Dill and Calpurnia, who spend a lot of time with Scout and who Scout grows very close to, are given a little more coverage in the book. The book looks more into the love-hate relationship between Scout and Dill, and it also looks more into Dill's family life. In the movie, he's basically just the nephew of their neighbor. Characters like Mrs. Dubose, who Scout has a strong negative attitude towards, are also examined more carefully in the book. In the movie, Mrs. Dubose is basically just a cranky old lady who Atticus manages to placate with his charm, thereby illustrating to his children that kindness wins the day. The book analyzes her character a little bit more by having Jem read to her in her last days before she dies. And in doing so strengthens the message of imagining others complexly. But the objectivity of the movie has advantages as well, mostly in the portrayal of the families. In the book, we have to be told by Scout that the Cunninghams are poor people who don't like to accept charity or thanks, and the Ewells are basically the scum of the earth. The movie doesn't necessarily tell us this, it shows us. Also, characters that Scout doesn't know or encounter as much get a little more coverage in the movie. Tom Robinson's emotional turmoil as he tells his story is clear, and Robert Duvall's performance of Boo Radley at the end is incredibly good, especially since he doesn't have a single line. The movie doesn't show us as many characters as the book does, and it doesn't delve as much into their characterization, but what it does show us really works well to forward the story. And I think, ultimately, I prefer the movie's characterization. It's the old storytelling rule of show, don't tell. The book explains a lot more as Scout tells us about these various characters, while the movie just shows them to us. And the ability of these actors to present these characters complexly really shows.